bountiful harvests we made this month, a tour of the California garden, some things for you to do, all this and a lot more in today's episode of California Gardening. So let's begin with all the harvests we made this month. Beginning with apples. We had our Anna apples growing on a semi-dwarf tree. And you can see these apples are very crunchy, very good looking. And we have several more apples growing on our tree, which will be ready for harvest very soon. Bananas. We had a lot of bananas on our dwarf Rajapuri banana plant, and they started ripening on the tree. And here you can see the harvest. These are extremely tasty bananas and a variety that you cannot buy in the grocery store. Beans. You can easily grow pole beans in a container as you see here with a simple trellis. And you can see the plant is loaded with beans. These are pole beans. And you can see they are nice and long, very good quality beans. This is an heirloom variety that I've been saving for many years now. This is a very productive plant. And the benefit of pole beans is that as long as you have a trellis and you have some space, these bean plants will yield a lot of beans. You can see all these beautiful looking beans that we're harvesting. Homegrown beans are extremely delicious. They're crunchy, they're fresh. Way better than what you can buy at the grocery store. And growing beans is very easy. They do prefer the spring and the fall weather. But in Southern California, they grow very well in the summers as well. Here is our harvest, beautiful looking pole beans. And we were back in just a few days to harvest more. The pole bean plant keeps producing a lot of beans. So you can keep harvesting beans from this plant for almost the whole season. And you can look at our harvest here, gorgeous looking beans. And here are some bush beans that we were growing on our raised bed. Now this particular variety is called the Garden King. And you can see that they are a lot tender, they are a lot smaller than the other bean variety that we harvested. And the benefit of growing bush beans is that they don't take up a lot of space and they are great to grow in areas like raised beds where you don't have to deal with trellis or other options to support your bean plant. And there are two ways to harvest bush beans. One is the way we are harvesting right now, where you just remove the beans from the sides. And doing so will encourage the plant to give you more beans, more flowers. And here's a look at our harvest. These are absolutely delicious. We also had bush beans growing in our greenstock planter. You can see this is the greenstock leaf planter. And we sowed 1 or 2 seeds in each pocket of this planter. And you can see how beautiful it looks, and it is completely covered with bush beans. And bush beans are one of the best vegetables you can grow in the greenstock planter, especially the greenstock leaf planter. We also have our self-watering greenstock planter module added, which waters this planter every day. So in the heat of the summer season, this is a great option to have. And you can see so many beans, so many bush beans on this plant. It's just amazing to grow bush beans in the greenstock leaf planter. If you're short on space, this is one of the best ways you can grow bush beans in your home garden. And you can see how many bush beans these plants produce. And since they are distributed over 42 pockets and 5 tiers, there's a lot of growing space here. You can look at our harvest from the greenstock planter. These are beautiful looking beans. Beets. Although a cool season crop, beets can be grown in Southern California pretty much throughout the year. And this is the red barren variety of beets. These grow to quite a big size. You can see how large this beetroot is. It has been growing for the last 90 days or so. And it has yielded a really good sized beetroot. And let's harvest the others as well. And you can look at our beet roots here. And the beet greens are edible too. And here is a harvest, beautiful looking beetroot and lovely looking greens. Chickpeas, also called garbanzo beans. This is a great crop to grow in your home garden because it's almost impossible to find fresh garbanzo beans or fresh chickpeas in the grocery store. And when you harvest these, I'm removing the entire plant because once the pods are produced, the plant doesn't produce any more. And a lot of people like eating the greens as well. They are extremely delicious. If you want to use the greens, you harvest them when the greens are tender. However, I'm growing these for the pods, the beans. Lots of pods on these plants, and this is a great harvest. And the way we use these chickpeas is remove them from the plant and then dry roast them and eat them. They're extremely delicious. Eggplants. We had multiple varieties of eggplants growing. This is the dwarf patio variety of eggplant. The plants are very small. They are dwarf sized, but they produce a lot of eggplants as you can see here. And these small eggplants are great for stuffing. You can grill them, you can shallow fry them, they taste just amazing. And in just one whiskey barrel container, we have grown 2 plants. And that's a good way to grow these eggplants. You grow 2 plants in one whiskey barrel container. And these are purple in color, beautiful looking eggplants, very delicious as well, and extremely easy to grow in containers. And you can see how many eggplants this plant has. So really good looking eggplants. And we were also growing the same variety of eggplant on our raised beds. You can see here even these plants have produced very good looking eggplants. And you can look at our harvest here. Beautiful looking eggplants ready to be eaten. Hyacinth beans. Our hyacinth beans were growing in a container, in our whiskey barrel container just like last year. We added one more whiskey barrel with this bean variety. A slightly different one as you can see here. It's slightly more rounded. It's still hyacinth beans though, and it's very delicious. You can see how these beans grow very well on a trellis in a container. They do get pretty large though. So you can look at all these beans that we are harvesting. This is an excellent quality hyacinth bean variety. A different one that we are growing just for this year. You can see the plant is quite loaded with hyacinth beans. And this hyacinth bean seems to be a little more tender compared to the other variety that we will shortly show you. But yes, this plant is quite loaded with hyacinth beans. They love the summer weather and they will grow really well when the weather is hot. You can see all these beautiful beans that we are harvesting. And let's look at our harvest here. Beautiful looking hyacinth beans. 2 varieties in one harvest. Ivy gourd. Our ivy gourd plants were growing at the back of our last raised bed. And you can see the ivy gourds are not really visible, but we did manage to harvest a lot of ivy gourds as you can see here. Okra. Okra loves the summer weather. It grows great when the weather is hot. This is the Nombo giant okra. You can see the okras are quite big. Just make sure you harvest your okras when they are tender. You can look at a harvest here, beautiful looking okras. And we were back to harvest okras on our raised beds. You can see that the pods are slightly smaller. And we will harvest all these tender okras now. And you can look at our harvest here. You have the regular variety on the left and the Nombo giant variety on the right. Onions. We were growing our potato onions in a container, in a whiskey barrel container. And you can see that they are now ready for harvest. The bulbs have formed very well. And if I stopped watering these onions, they would dry automatically in the whiskey barrel. However, I removed these onions just to save some space so that I can plant something else in the whiskey barrel. These will have to be cured outside before we use it. And this is our harvest, and after just a few days of drying, you can see that the bulbs are now separating from the top. This is how your bulb should look like. The top should be completely dry. As you see here, the bulbs are looking really good. You can see how they grow in bunches. So after you harvest these potato onions, you can replant one of the bulbs and it will branch out into multiple onions again. And this is how you keep growing your supply of potato onions in your garden. Peaches. We were growing our 4-in-1 peach tree, and you can see here the plant has grown well, and the first peach to mature was the Dorset golden variety of peach. And you can see all these peaches that we are harvesting here. You can look at our harvest, beautiful looking peaches. Peppers. No harvest is complete without peppers, and here we are harvesting our hot peppers first. This is the cow horn pepper. Not really a very hot pepper, in fact a milder pepper variety. But it looks like the chilies that you get in the store. And it's called the cow horn pepper because the pepper shape looks like the horn of a cow, which is very interesting. And this is a milder pepper variety, not very hot. So if you like milder peppers, this is a great variety to grow, a very different variety to grow. But it's even less hot than the cayenne pepper or the serrano pepper. But just look at how beautiful these peppers look. You can look at the cow horn pepper harvest here, beautiful looking peppers. And you can also see our giant Marconi peppers here. And now we'll harvest our bell peppers. We were growing bell peppers in many areas of our garden. This one is growing in a whiskey barrel container. And as you can see, you can easily grow 3 pepper plants in one container. And the peppers are looking amazing. We are harvesting all of these bell peppers from our whiskey barrel container. And they've grown quite well this season. Now peppers can be grown in raised beds, containers, or in the ground, and they do equally well. And you can see our harvest here, beautiful looking bell peppers, and we'll be back for more soon. Snake gourds. Now snake gourds are an acquired taste. I would highly recommend tasting snake gourds first before you start growing them in your home garden. But for those of you who are familiar with this vegetable, the homegrown snake gourds are extremely fresh. They taste really good. And we were growing this not only on our raised bed but in a container as well. And snake gourds are easily grown in containers. As you can see here, this plant is yielding a lot of snake gourds, which we will go ahead and harvest now. You can see pretty nice looking snake gourds. And just like okra, snake gourds should be harvested quickly, not left too long on the plant. Otherwise they get fibrous and are not very delicious. You can look at all these snake gourds growing, and they're called a snake gourd because they look like a snake. And here is our harvest, beautiful looking snake gourds. And we were back to harvest a few more snake gourds from our raised bed. You can see here all these beautiful looking snake gourds again. And they grow pretty quickly once the weather is warm. They start growing quickly, and they also produce a lot of snake gourds when it gets hot. So all in all, a great vegetable to grow in your home garden if you like the taste. Here is another harvest, beautiful looking snake gourds again. Taro root. Most of you are familiar with our taro patch on our raised bed. It was time to start harvesting a couple of plants to see how the taro roots are doing. Now remember that summer is not the best time to harvest taro because the roots will keep maturing through the fall season. And then when the plants start slowing down, then it's a good time to harvest the taro root. However, we did want to harvest a few taro plants just to see how they're growing, and so that we could use some of the taro root. We needed to use some taro roots this month. So you can see that the plant has grown quite large. The taro roots are still maturing, but you do see a lot of mature roots on the plant. And we'll show you how we harvest these taro roots. So either you chop off the entire root from the bottom of the plant, which looks like this. You can remove all the root hairs that are surrounding the taro root so that you can cut it up easily. They also look a lot better once the roots are chopped off. You can see here this is a massive taro root, and there will be many more like these smaller plants as well. You can just chop off the top and then use the taro root. And you can see that if the taro root is not completely formed, you can just replant the whole plant again and it will grow back. So let's harvest one more plant. And remember that each plant also gives rise to a lot of surrounding plants. So one taro root will multiply into a lot of taro roots around the same plant. And that way you get a much bigger harvest. So you can see one taro root here quite big. Once again, we are removing the root hairs around the taro root. And you can see how nice and big this taro root is. And here is the main plant. And this is how you remove the main taro root. This is the biggest taro root that you will find, which is in the main plant. And once again, we are removing the root hairs around it. And here you can see the biggest taro root is the one that's found just below the main plant. And here is one more. You can clearly see the taro root forming at the bottom of the plant. And the best part is that if you chop off the taro root at the bottom and still leave a little bit of root on the top, like we are doing here, you can replant this taro root plant again. You can look at our taro root harvest here, beautiful looking harvest from 2 plants. But there are also some taro plants that we replanted. So these will grow into bigger plants again for the next season. So we have many more taro root plants that we will harvest in the upcoming month. Tomatoes. We were growing several tomato varieties in containers and on the raised bed. And this one is a variety that we were growing in a container as a single stem tomato. And some more here. And on the raised bed, there were 2 ways we were growing our tomatoes. This is a single stem method. You can see the tomatoes are maturing quite quickly now on the single stem. And we will start harvesting a few tomatoes. There are plenty more on the plant that we will be harvesting later. But you can see the first round of harvest. And this is another single stem tomato on our raised bed, on the last raised bed. And we were growing several varieties of tomatoes. And you can look at our first tomato harvest here very early in the season. And here is one more harvest just a few days later. And we were back to harvest more tomatoes. Now the single stem method of growing tomatoes has been the most productive for us. This is the crimson tomato variety that you're seeing here. It's a very delicious tomato variety, good looking tomato as well. And here you can see the tomatoes that were growing on the raised bed but on a ladder trellis. And the ladder trellis is easily available at your home improvement store. You can buy them at any home improvement store and use it on your raised beds. This is the cloudy variety of tomato. Much rounder looking tomatoes, very beautiful looking. And the crimson tomato also produced these beefsteak tomatoes sometimes. So I wasn't sure why some of these tomatoes were the beefsteak style and some were the regular style. But all in all, these were great tomatoes, as you can see here. And here is another harvest of beautiful looking tomatoes, very delicious. And there are more tomatoes here from our raised bed. Once again, this is the tomato that's growing on the ladder trellis on the raised bed. And this is the cloudy variety of tomato again. You can look at our harvest here, beautiful looking cloudy tomatoes. And if you look at our single stem tomato here just after a month, you can see that there are several more tomatoes now. We are harvesting many more from the same plant. And they've grown really well. Growing tomatoes using the single stem method definitely results in a much higher yield. You can see here the plant is now focused on making tomatoes rather than growing foliage, which is a great way of growing tomatoes because you have a limited growing time and you want to maximize the number of tomatoes your plant produces. You can look at another harvest here, gorgeous looking tomatoes. And now let's begin with the garden tour. Starting with our container garden, we have our longevity spinach plant. We haven't harvested a lot of longevity spinach, but the plant is growing well. Followed by our hyacinth bean plant that has been overwintered from last year. producing some nice looking beans as you can see here. This is the classic Hyacinth bean variety that we've been growing for a long time now. We have the hummingbird tree. Now I do love these greens, so I planted one more tree in this pot, growing pretty well as you can see, very delicious leaves. Followed by the snacking cucumber that's growing in this whiskey barrel container. Already seeing some cucumbers here. We have more hyacinth beans here, one variety on the right and then a different variety on the left. You saw us harvesting this variety from our garden. Plants looking good. On the next side, we have bell peppers. This is a bell pepper plant producing really well. A lot of bell peppers here. Followed by an Indian variety eggplant that hasn't fruited yet. We have more peppers. This is the bell pepper again. We love eating bell peppers. We have some cilantro plants here and a basil plant, the sweet basil. Followed by more cilantro that's bolted now. And this huge strawberry bush. It's growing like crazy. We have our potatoes. The vines are still young and green. So we will wait till they turn yellow, after which we'll harvest them. We have taro root, a new variety, two new varieties actually. One with purple leaves and one with purple stems and green leaves. We have more bell peppers here growing. This plant is not growing that well, but it's still producing some peppers. We have our turmeric plants. This is the flowering kind of turmeric. Grows really well here in Southern California. Our ivy gourd plant is looking good. We harvested a lot of ivy gourds from this plant. Our mint plant is looking okay. You can see a lot of caterpillars have eaten up the leaves. We have more taro plants growing. They grow very well in the shade. This is a snake gourd plant that's looking good. A lot of snake gourds on this plant. We have our Nombo giant okra that's growing well. Followed by our eggplant. This is an Italian type eggplant looking really nice. Followed by our patio dwarf eggplant that produces small eggplants as you can see here. Beautiful looking eggplants again. We did harvest some eggplants and there are still a lot more on the plant. Another bell pepper plant here, as you can see. Yeah, we are growing a lot of bell peppers this season. Cherry tomatoes, you can see the cherry tomatoes are looking good as well. They're grown as dual stems, two stems for one plant. And then we have our Roma tomatoes, the bush Roma from last year. And finally, the giant Marconi pepper that's not doing too well now. It still has a few peppers on the plant. And on the other side, we have some more containers. In the first one, we have the 4-in-1 apple tree. And there's also an ash gourd plant that's growing here. And you can see the ash gourd here, pretty good looking ash gourd ready for harvest now. And we also have our watermelon plants growing here. You can see 2 watermelons being produced right now, looking pretty good. They need a lot of water to grow. We have our firecracker plant. You can see how beautifully it has flowered now. Gorgeous flowers, and they will turn into seeds as well. We have more tomatoes. This is the big Indian tomato, producing well. Followed by another single stem tomato, the crimson tomato. Then we have a determinate tomato variety that's also fruiting well. And then we have our Thai dragon pepper that is producing a lot of peppers, ready for harvest. More tomato plants. This is again a determinate tomato variety. Followed by another eggplant, another dwarf patio type eggplant. And then our holy basil tree, which is growing okay. And finally, we have our fig tree. The fig tree is producing figs, looking very good now. We will be able to harvest these figs very soon. And that completes the tour of our container garden. Let's now move on to the raised beds. In the first raised bed, we have some cayenne peppers growing. You can see the cayenne peppers, they look pretty good. Lots of cayenne peppers here ready for harvest now. And we have our onions growing here. All these onions, the bulbs are growing larger. They will be ready for harvest very soon. You can see that the tops are falling over. And let me show you some more on the other side. You can see here beautiful looking onions. And on the trellis, you can see the snake gourds. You can see the plants have grown well, and you can see some snake gourds as well here. And this trellis works out really well. On the other side, we have a lot of ash gourd plants. We planted them in the raised bed, and you can see a lot of ash gourds being produced. Here's a large one right here. The plant has grown pretty dense. And you can see several ash gourds throughout the raised bed. You can see some more ash gourds here. There are a couple of ash gourds on the raised bed. And then you can see some okras. The okras are growing well. You can see a lot of okra pods being produced. And finally, we have our Thai eggplants, the Thai green eggplants that are growing well. On the other side, you can see all our tomatoes growing on the ladder trellis. You can see how beautifully they have grown. This is a great way to grow tomatoes. And in the center, we have all these volunteer tomato plants that have been just growing all across the raised bed. And then some more tomatoes that are growing on this ladder trellis. We have the crimson variety, the cloudy day variety, as well as the Indian tomatoes, all growing really well on this raised bed. You can see how beautiful the ladder trellis looks like once the plants have grown. So this is a great way to grow tomatoes. If you're thinking of growing tomatoes, this is an awesome way to get a lot of tomatoes for the space that you have. One more look at the whole raised bed. It looks amazing. And on the other raised bed, we have ridge gourds growing. The plants have grown very big now. They are producing ridge gourds, as you can see here. And we expect to harvest some more ridge gourds as the season progresses. Right next to that, we have two single stem tomatoes. You can see how nicely they have grown too. Single stem tomatoes are probably one of the best ways you can grow tomatoes other than the ladder trellis method. But a lot of tomatoes here, as you can see. And in between, we planted some okras. You can see some okra plants here. And then we have our peppers. This is the cow horn pepper, followed by the super chili, which is a spicy chili variety. And you can see the okra plants as well here. There's a dwarf patio eggplant in the center. And then our taro patch. We harvested a couple of taro plants from here. And on the next raised bed, we have more single stem tomatoes growing really well, followed by our Nombo giant okra. And then you can see that the raised bed has been taken over by these sweet potato plants. We have two snacking type cucumbers growing in the center, followed by these taro plants. After harvesting the taro roots, we replanted them. And then we have our ivy gourd plants on the back, looking really good. And that completes a tour of our raised bed garden. And let's take a quick look at our green stalk planter. We have our bush beans growing in the green stalk planter. This is the classic green stalk planter. And we have 42 slots to grow our bush beans. And we are growing about 2 plants per pocket. So this is a lot of bush beans, as you can see here. In our classic green stalk planter, we have a lot of strawberries that are growing, as well as some chili plants and some herbs. So it's a great way to grow a lot of plants in a very compact space. You can see how beautiful both our green stalk planters look. And now let's look at some things for you to do in your garden. At our local Home Depot, I found this cow manure, which is called black cow. And this is an excellent amendment for your garden. I just picked it up from my local Home Depot. Nobody sent this product to me. I just started using it because I know that cow manure is a great addition to your home garden. And all we are really doing is spreading this out on our raised bed. Now, any kind of compost like composted cow manure is going to add a lot of beneficial bacteria, a lot of organic matter, as well as a lot of nutrients to your soil. So just make sure that every 3 months you're adding some kind of compost, some kind of organic matter to your raised beds, and you just spread it out just like you see here. Make sure that it's evenly spread out. You don't want to concentrate this in a particular spot. Now when you get the cow manure, it's a little hydrophobic, it resists water, and that's perfectly normal. You have to deep water it as soon as you add it to the raised bed. But before that, we are going to mix it into the soil. So just use a small trowel, mix it into the soil, just the top few inches. You don't have to dig in too deep. You want the nutrients to be absorbed by the plants as you water them on a daily basis. And this is a slow release fertilizer, so it works really well. Now you need to deep water your raised bed. We added the composted cow manure, and then we are deep watering our raised bed, and this prepares it for growing our next crop. And there we have it. If you like this video, smash that like button, and if you have any questions or comments, put them in the comments box below. If you're not already a subscriber, hit that subscribe button to get all our future updates. We'll see you again soon. Happy gardening!